Hello. We're now at midday, so I think I can officially start. This is very much a thought piece, so this is not, I'm not going to try and sell you anything. I'm going to try and hopefully just try and deliver some, what intend to be interesting insights into just where e-learning is developing. So I've kind of added, we've described this as e-learning in a multi-screen world, but I added the word networked there, as that's another really important part of where e-learning is developing. Now, if we think back over the last few decades, e-learning has matured and standardized. It's because we've got these well-developed authoring packages which ensure it's cost-effective. There's this SCORM compliance where we've got standards as to how content is produced so it's interoperable. And we've got these tried and tested best practices. So kind of, having been involved in e-learning for over that last 20 years, it really does feel like, you know, we've got to a point where we actually know what we're doing and we can kind of predict how long things will take, how much things will cost. But if we actually think about where those standards came from, then basically everything that we've got in that standard e-learning vision is very much from the traditional, from the books, from the classroom. So you can see they attempt to simulate the classroom through the tutor conferencing. There's that clear hierarchy of the tutor and the students. And there's also this attempt to build on the traditional book. So kind of the interactive learning where you click through next, it's a little bit more interesting sometimes, a little bit less interesting sometimes, but basically it is the same type of approach that you get within the old textbook. And this is really what we could think of as e-learning 1.0. And if you're aware, obviously, on the internet generally there was the web 1.0, and what we're looking at now is the web 2.0. And what I kind of feel is that what we're looking at is a shift away from this, where we're actually looking at very, very drastic changes to how e-learning will be, and that's what I'm using the word e-learning 2.0 for, and that's what I'm going to explore in this presentation here. So just to kind of like look at the underlying things that are driving the change away from this nice, stable e-learning world that we've reached, kind of look at some of the trends in technology. So, interesting thing, the PC market is collapsing. In this year, tablet sales are going to be overtaking notebook sales. 64% increase in tablets, 5% decline in PCs. A huge shift in just what technology is being used. Also, of course, as we're all well aware, the smartphones are becoming ubiquitous. They're just absolutely everywhere. Where 250 million units in the third quarter of last year, 70% of Generation Y using smartphones. Average is about 2 hours a day for most people using these things. And it's also, research has shown, it's also the device. It's the thing that we get most stressed about if we don't have it on us. It's even more stressful than not having your passport. It's kind of like, you know, the smartphone is the thing that we really need and we don't like losing. And there's a huge appetite to use that for everything that's imaginable. It is just taking over so many functions in our lives. It is just becoming that center of our experience of the world. And kind of around this, as a result of this shift, we're kind of getting to this multi-screen world, where in the old world, the PC was very much a device. It was the computer. You went to that device where you used a computer and you did your computing. However, the real difference in the new world is that it's not that there is a device that is the computer, it is that computing is moving into every device that you are using. And that's the real importance with tablets and smartphones. It's not that they've made PCs smaller, or they made them a little bit more usable. It is simply a change from where it was the technology that was the driver, and that's really where Microsoft, etc. were making their money, to a world where it is just the normal, everyday things around you, which they are taking computing into them, and they are providing computing for you at the point where you want it, when you want it, how you want it. So it's very much not just a matter of screens. The screens are simply a symptom of this shift in how technology is being used. And then also the other thing is the social changes, the social networking. So these are just quick examples. These slides could carry on forever because there is just such a huge amount of change out there. You look at Facebook, you see last year they gained another 170 million users. They have a total of 1.23 billion active monthly users, which is 1/5 of the world is actively using Facebook every month, which is a fairly it's a fairly dramatic thought when you think it wasn't that long ago before when Facebook was something that very few people had heard of. Revenue's up, and also increasingly, of course, more people are using it on the smartphones. WhatsApp, which of course Facebook recently bought, you actually look at the first 4 years of that, and the growth in that is faster than the first 4 years in Facebook. So if anything, everything is moving faster and faster. Instant messaging, 30 billion in the UK, 18 trillion globally. So a huge shift in our social interaction into these technologies. So then we look at the trends in learning, and there's the MOOCs, these massive open online courses, where you can just see from the numbers here, 1.25 million students, 4 million students, 750,000 students, 1 billion downloads, just the sheer scale of what is happening out there in this space, which is very much not part of just the traditional learning space. It is new things happening out there around the traditional learning spaces and moving in with serious speed and bringing in serious numbers of people. And there's the other element, which is content is everywhere. So if you just think about when you want to know something, you're almost guaranteed to simply go to Google and you just do a search. And you'll have noticed that Google is increasingly allowing you to just say, what is this, tell me where's this, etc. It's trying to build Google so that it is understanding what you want to know, so that it is providing the answers to that. So Google itself is becoming a huge learning engine for us. I just need to look at the scale where Google Encyclopedia, those little panels that crop up when you do a search, 570 million concepts, relationships, facts, figures, while Google itself is 30 trillion pages updated 100 billion times a month. So just get a sense of the scale of the sheer kind of engine that is driving this knowledge machine out there. And of course, Wikipedia as the small compared to Google, but still a very important part of that, finding out answers to what we want to know. And the other elements, these are a little bit more just beginning, they're kind of on the horizon. There's this kind of attempt to have better understanding of the learner. So Tin Can API, this is something which allows, in the past with the SCORM, you had content which was in your LMS, and it tracked how well you did as part of that course. The Tin Can API is, the concept behind that is that you could be learning anywhere, and that the learning can contribute to your personal learning record. So this is a shift in the direction away from the centralized, controlled, managed learning to one where it actually uses what people are using on a day-to-day basis, which is the Google, the open content, etc. Is trying to use that and bring that into something that is useful for us, for people who have the remit to try and improve the learning of our workforce. So, thinking about what this means for e-learning. So, in the old world, it really was about scarcity of supply. The old universities, colleges, and the training in workplaces were very much about there were only limited places where you could get this learning. There was somebody who had to be booked to deliver the course. The knowledge was difficult to get. The content was hard to find, and the experts were rarely accessible. And the e-learning 1.0 model that has dominated our learning for the last couple of decades is very much a continuation of this undersupply of learning. Whilst the new world is basically the economics dominated by oversupply, where I can find out about anything I want, wherever I am, whenever I want to. There's an ever-growing repository of data about any subject I want to know. There's this massive abundance of content, and I can also even find experts or people pretending to be experts on the other side of the world if I want to. This is a world where it's shifted from I needed to wait on somebody to give me the learning to one where I can get that learning at the moment that I want. And basically, whether we like it or not, this world is here. People in our organizations are using this whole oversupply of content to learn constantly and to help them at work. And eLearning 2.0 is how we actually deal with this economics of oversupply. So, kind of the multi-screen, the multi-device, the learning as and when I want it, the socially networked, these are things which we need to bring into the design of our learning. So we need to be developing new types of skills, helping people learn how to search, to filter, to critique, how to use a semantic searching, and shift the skill development from the oversupply rather dealing with the oversupply rather than simply knowledge retention. The future is less one of what I know now, but knowing how to find out what I need to know at the moment when I want to find that. This is basically a paradigm shift for learning. So it's moving from content as the focus to one where the content is just simply part of a greater, larger ecosphere. So e-learning for the future is not going to be one of saying, here are the courses, here are the tutors who are going to deliver that courses. E-learning for the future is very much one where it's about creating the communities, bringing people together, allowing them to be in contact with each other, and giving the tools and the help for them to be able to take advantage of that, rather than simply, here is the content itself. So we can probably also actually see a future where we will need much less content, because there is this huge oversupply of content out there. So the shifts in terms of what we're developing will move away from creating courses to ones where we're actually creating the communities where people can find the help that they need. And then also just a kind of little bit of to think about for the future, whether this is just the beginning. So if we just imagine a world where, I mean, these are very speculative things, the Google Glass, the smartwatches, the virtual reality. But then it wasn't that long ago where, if you just think back to 20 years and think of the world that we have now and just think whether you could imagine that it would be like this, it is almost impossible to say that that would have been possible to do. So whether or not these are the particular technologies that will dominate for the future, one can see that there will be huge changes for the way our learning will be delivered. And the other interesting element is that digital seems to do two things. It provides this global, mass, easy access knowledge, content, and materials, but also it actually generates more value for the real world as well. So if you look at the music industry, back in about 2008, revenues from live events overtook revenues from music sales. And what's happening there is that people are paying the premium to get that exclusive real-world experience. And it's very similar to what's happening in the high street, where increasingly you get the nice coffee shop, the nice markets. And it's we could see a similar thing happening to learning, where you'll have your mass, easy access learning that is globally available, and then complementing that will be the high-value real-world experiences that you cannot get in the digital space. So you can it's not that digital will be removing the old world training, it will actually make it higher value and will create expectations for that to be something which is more special, more exclusive, something which people really value and really look forward to. And then just to, in terms of dealing with this, we ourselves have been working on a product which is called MojoMobile. MojoMobile is, you can think of it as a kind of Pinterest for learning. So this is one, we've been designing this to allow people to easily bookmark and share the knowledge that they are gathering on a day-to-day basis in their workplace, to share that with their teams, and then to provide the tools for them to be able to generate little learning snippets from that, to be able to ensure that those bookmarks are not lost. So it's an attempt to deal with that oversupply and create a tool that will allow people to take advantage of it rather than being swamped in it. Anybody who's tried to store the sheer quantity of information within email, etc., will know just how difficult it is to be able to deal with that supply of content. And then MojoCentral, using the Tin Can API to be able to track and to make sense of the learning within MojoMobile. And then just to move back to the kind of practical of what we can do now. Obviously, this is looking at the broad changes, and it can be a bit overwhelming. but just thinking about some of the practical things that we can do to take advantage of the changes. So in using mobile and using these smaller screens, it's not simply a question of repurposing or porting. We need to create new types of experiences. There is the tactile element that we need to be aware of. We need to be also aware that audio actually becomes quite a difficult thing in the new space, where people are using technology in lots of different areas where there will be other people around them. It is no longer that exclusive desktop space. And also the duration of learning away from that large, big courses to ones which are much smaller and, from down to 10 seconds, even up to kind of 3 to 5 minutes. And then just kind of like some little case studies of work that we've done. So,
Hi there. So I'll just talk to you about a couple of case studies we've done with PwC. So we've been working with PwC for about 17 years. And I think it's fair to say in that time we've done work for PwC which would fit into the sort of Learning 1.0 category, but now we're excited to be doing work which we feel fits into the Learning 2.0 category. So this first example I'll talk about, Genesis Park is PwC's global leadership training program. Used to exist very much as a residential. They would go off to, I believe it's New Zealand, and spend a long amount of time away from the workplace in a residential environment, learning how to be, the best leaders in the world. Now we are moving towards a situation where it's much more blended. There's still a residential element, but we've been working with PwC to work out a way that we can take some of that experience and inject that into the day-to-day workplace, so that people aren't having to leave their day-to-day jobs and go away from the workplace to learn. They can learn on the job, and they can have tools at their disposal which help them in the moment. So we did a series of very simple, very practical, iPad-based apps, basically, for PwC leaders or potential leaders, which help them in the moment with specific leadership tasks. So examples might be, I'm a leader and I need to be decision making. I'm going to go into a meeting where we need to make some decisions. We need to come out of this meeting having made decisions. Now the app basically briefs them on decision making, so that would be something they would use just 5 minutes before they have this meeting, and it would be asking them questions around, how much scope are you going to let the group decide? What are your limits as a leader? What are you going to make the final decision on? How much of a consensus approach are you going to take? How much of a more top-down approach are you going to take? So that's an example. Other techniques like reframing, the idea as a manager, as a leader, how you say something, how the perspective you put on things can change everybody's perspective and their motivation. If you look on the bright side, if you reframe something as a positive rather than as a negative, then you can really, and you do that day to day, every day, you can really have a big influence on the motivation of your team. So that is a technique, and that technique is demonstrated through the app. And the other thing we did with this app was use it as a tool that a leader can actually cascade that learning down to their team. So the iPad's very good in that you can carry it around with you, and you can also just flip it around and then present to others the technique of reframing. So if you're working with your managers and you want to cascade that knowledge down, you just turn down the iPad. So we used a very simple presentation techniques. That's a slide there. We did a series of slides for people to explain and cascade the principle of reframing. Second example was using video. Now, when we move learning onto mobile, we don't just take what existed on the desktop, make it smaller, make the hit areas bigger, and voila, you have a mobile learning product. People use mobile devices in a very different way to them using desktops. So we know that mobile devices are very good for small, bite-sized content. They're quite bad for sitting in front of for an hour or even half an hour. We know that people like to consume content on mobile, but they're actually quite tricky if you're inputting your own content. So we would stay away from pieces of learning where you need to input a lot into the device. That's better done on the desktop. But we are very keen on using mobile for consuming content. And then there's obviously looking at use in the moment, in the workplace, geographical possibilities, using them as communication devices, etc. So this piece it's a branching scenario. It uses video to take people through a day in the life of a person at PwC. You play yourself, you are the camera. And this worked it was on the desktop, but it worked very well on mobile because it was short video clips, and at the end you have to make a decision. So it's a branching simulation that uses exclusively video and very small pieces of text that ask you to make a decision, A, B, or C, and then you see the outcome and you're asked to make another decision. That won, as it says there, the DemoFest award for best mobile product, and it's just a short experience. So it's like I think it takes about 10 minutes to get through it, and then you have a sort of roundup at the end, which reinforces and sort of mops up the key learning points.
Okay. Thank you, Matt. And we we wanted to include this case study because it's an interesting one and it's quite unusual. We were asked by the BBC World Service Trust to help them develop learning for English language in Bangladesh. So we went off to Bangladesh and didn't know what to expect, spent a lot of time in the villages, testing out ideas, developing approaches with the people there on the ground. And we ended up, what came out of this was BBC Janala. And BBC Janala is a mobile-only learning platform, basically, but something that works on the oldest mobile phones. So this is an example of how it's not about the technology, it's about using the capabilities that are around us. So this is something where you simply ring up a phone number and you get an English language lesson. You listen to the lesson, it lasts for about 3 minutes, and then after the lesson you get options of moving on to the next one or answering questions, and you just simply use the keypad on the phone to be able to answer 1, 2, 3, etc. And then once you finish with your lessons, you get a text message back with some questions, and you can text in a reply, and it tells you whether you're right. So through that, we are using a very, very simple, old-school technology to deliver learning in a way that allows people to improve their English in environments which are far away from all the modcons of Western life. And we managed to get 25 million users. Well, the ambition is 25 million users by 2017. That's already been achieved, where they had 1 million calls within the first 3 months alone. And I think that's a really, really good example of, and I think this is something that we can apply not just to special situations like Bangladesh, this is something we can apply to all around us. Think about using what we've already got rather than just something new for its own sake. It's about understanding how the technology fits into your life and how you can actually make that work for learning purposes. So there, and kind of another really, really important part, very, very simple, extensively test. Before we went out there, we had all sorts of ideas about what we would be doing, and basically everything that we thought initially was wrong, and through that we actually came up with an approach that did deliver. And I think that applies to anything, that the best approach is very much I always think of it as kind of like the minimal viable product. Instead of trying to develop everything in one go, work out the absolute basics to deliver the learning, and then test that, see if it works, and then add more afterwards. And there, I think, but we can open us up for questions if anybody can make this a little bit interactive rather than us just talking to you. So I don't know if anybody has any questions, observations, thoughts, or disagreements. Yeah. Anybody brave? No?
Is anybody doing anything that they'd class as learning 2.0 at the minute they'd like to tell us about?
Or just put your hands up. No.
A very shy audience this time. Last time we had a few questions. Okay, well, thank you very much for coming. We're at stand 26 behind you. Very keen to meet people and talk about any of the aspects of our talk or anything we can help with in terms of learning content, learning technology, consultancy, design, the whole remit really. What we do is very bespoke and we feel quite creative. So we'd be keen to meet anyone. Thanks very much.